For 6 weeks, US airstrikes have been hitting the Houthis in Yemen daily, and almost every day the Houthis strike back, or at least they try to. So the US has decided to up the ante. On April 22, Fox News revealed that US President Donald Trump had officially informed Congress that he had directed additional forces equipped for combat to be moved to the Middle East. The primary target, the Houthis in Yemen. There's no doubt this move significantly affects the situation in this troubled region. In fact, it could also have long-range negative implications for the future of the Houthis' dogged resistance. Trump's latest move comes a day after the US launched a record 25 airstrikes in just one day on the Tuhayta district near the strategic Red Sea city of Houthi. The Ras Isa oil terminal, located north of Houthi city, was destroyed by US strikes the previous week, reportedly resulting in at least 74 deaths and 171 injuries, according to Houthi sources. The loss of their main oil stores is undoubtedly a massive blow to the Houthis' military plans. It's also a significant setback for the Yemeni population, whose economy has been largely dysfunctional due to ongoing conflicts and airstrikes, including those by the US and its allies since the mid-2000s. According to Yemen's official news agency Sabah, Tuhayta was far from the only territory hit by US airstrikes on Monday night. It reported that 3 US airstrikes hit the Barash area in the Sanhan district south of Sana'a early on Tuesday morning. This came hours after US warplanes targeted Al-Majah area in the Harub village of Al-Hissin district. Airstrikes also hit the Sirwa, Al-Abdiya and Madzar districts in the central province of Marib on Monday night. Cameron Island, located at the southern end of the Red Sea, was also hit by several air attacks. CENTCOM and the US Department of Defense have been way less forthcoming about the number of strikes they have carried out since the beginning of Operation Rough Rider, the name given to the campaign against the Houthis. But it's estimated that anywhere from 500 to 1,000 have already taken place, leaving over 200 dead and scores more injured. Of those, around 70 are believed to be Houthi fighters, a drop in the ocean compared to the estimated tens of thousands in the Yemeni armed forces. The US has also claimed it has taken out several members of the Houthi leadership. However, names of these alleged targets have not been released by either the US or the Houthis, and all the main Houthi figures have made public appearances in recent days. These latest strikes are likely to have caused more extensive damage, but if Trump thought they would act to dampen the Houthis' resolve to resist the US, he's likely to have been left frustrated yet again. As has become customary during this campaign, the Houthis immediately announced retaliatory strikes of their own, albeit of a much more modest nature. On Wednesday morning, air raid sirens blared across the north of Israel for the first time since a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanese militia Hezbollah came into effect in January. Hezbollah had been pounding the north for months before the ceasefire came into effect, with an increasing focus on the important port city of Haifa. The Israeli army announced in a statement that air raid sirens were activated on Wednesday morning in several regions and cities on the northern side of the occupied lands, including Haifa, Kiryat Atta, and the Western Galilee, warning of incoming rocket fire. This time the missile, which was intercepted and destroyed by Israeli air defenses, didn't come from Lebanon, it came from Yemen. The Houthis have been launching ballistic missiles and long-range drones at Israel almost daily that they say are in retaliation for the US airstrikes on Yemen. But this is the first time they've attempted to hit as far north as Haifa. Most appear to have been aimed at Tel Aviv and nearby Ben Gurion International Airport, some 60 miles further south. Israel claims all of these have been shot down, and there's footage to suggest that the majority definitely were. Yet the number of Israelis treated for injuries sustained while rushing to shelters just keeps growing. An angry Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Tuesday vowed to respond with force to these ongoing Houthi attacks. In response, the deputy director of the Houthis media organization, Nasser al-Din Amir, said, "Netanyahu is our enemy, and we always strive to keep our enemies angry." Earlier on the same day, Houthi military spokesman Yahya Sari announced that the Houthis had shot down yet another US $35 million MQ-9 Reaper drone, this time in the northwestern Yemeni province of Hajjar. The Houthis claimed this to be the 7th Reaper shot down during April alone, and the 22nd overall since October 2023. While they have provided footage they say substantiates their claims, although the footage is disputed, the US has acknowledged the loss of only 6. At the same time, Sari announced that the Houthis had again targeted both the USS Harry Truman and the USS Carl Vinson aircraft carriers with cruise and ballistic missiles, along with long-range drones. The USS Harry S. Truman is stationed in the Red Sea, while the USS Carl Vinson is operating in the Arabian Sea. Both aircraft carriers, along with their escort fleets of destroyers and warplanes, are deployed to support US military operations against Houthi targets in Yemen. Further, in a statement also released on Tuesday, the Yemeni armed forces claimed a significant increase in their capabilities, marking a major milestone in their ongoing defense operations. The armed forces, as they confront aggression, assert that their military position is now significantly better than it was weeks ago, the statement read. Our forces have benefited from recent advancements and have succeeded in affecting the enemy's actions, successfully preventing many of their assaults, it continued. They also claimed several successful strikes against both the Harry S. Truman and Carl Vinson using cruise missiles and drones. However, no evidence for these claims have been provided, and the US has to date denied any successful strikes by the Houthis on any of its naval assets in the region. These statements echo the sentiments voiced by the chairman of Yemen's Supreme Political Council, Mahdi al-Mashat, on Sunday, the day before the US's massive strikes on Tuhayta and beyond. I assure you that the aggression failed from its very first day, and we had previously managed to obtain information that thwarted the aggression before it occurred, he said during a meeting of the National Defense Council. He further claimed that Sana'a has not suffered even 1% damage at the military level despite all the US strikes. Referring to the Harry S. Truman, he claimed that it had lost its command and control and as a result been rendered out of service in the early days of the campaign. How much of all that is true is an open question, given the US's uncharacteristic sealed lips about the ongoing operation. However, two things are glaringly apparent. Firstly, the Houthis' resolve to keep confronting Israel and the US appears to be stronger than ever, at least on the face of it. And secondly, the US campaign has not yet managed to stop the Houthis from attacking Israel or US naval assets in the area. And that explains Trump's decision to dispatch even more US military force to the Red Sea region to confront them. But what is he planning to send and at what cost? The US already has an eyebrow-raising force in the area, and the campaign is blowing through money like a tornado through a pile of dry leaves. A CNN report in early April claimed that the US had burned through around $1 billion in the first 3 weeks of the campaign on munitions alone. That included JASSM long-range cruise missiles, JSO's GPS-guided glide bombs, and Tomahawk missiles, according to the US military sources cited in the report. It's also been widely reported that the US is using its 30,000-pound Boeing GBU-57 bunker buster bombs against the Houthis' deep underground weapons storage facilities. If you add the cost of the munitions to the vast sums needed to maintain 2 aircraft carriers at sea and in combat mode for an extended period, then add the cost of maintaining a fleet of B-2 bombers at the Diego Garcia base in the Maldives and launching bombing raids 2,300 miles away in Yemen, and you get which very well could be a very costly exercise, which to date has not produced the desired effect, stopping the Houthi attacks. Moreover, the vast numbers of munitions being expended on the daily raids on multiple sites are steadily depleting the US's stockpiles. This was already an area of significant concern for the US long before Operation Rough Rider began. In November 2024, a responsible statecraft investigation revealed that while the United States is not going to run out of missiles tomorrow, its missile inventory, both offensive and defensive, is dwindling. As a result of its vast contributions to both Ukraine and Israel over the past few years, supplies of artillery shells, Patriot, JASSM and Hawk missiles and more are being depleted at a far greater rate than they can be replenished. The investigation concluded that, at this rate, the US might soon lack the scale of weapons inventory to confidently confront China or Russia, let alone both. So, with all that in mind, the question is increasingly being raised as to whether expending all this cash and explosive power on the Houthis is worth it. To be clear, the Houthis pose no existential threat whatsoever to the US itself. Unlike China or Russia, they simply don't have the means to project any power at all against the US mainland. It's debatable whether they even have the power to cause meaningful problems for any of the many US bases in the region. They did manage to significantly disrupt commercial shipping through the Red Sea during their year-long blockade in 2024. Shipping giant Maersk estimated that this caused a 15 to 20% disruption in global shipping as a result. Some 30% of global trade transits through the Red Sea and Suez Canal, but the amount of US trade included in that figure is inconsequential. So why is dealing with the Houthis such a priority for Trump, particularly at a time when his stated top priority is putting the US first? Trump and his team claim that the purpose of Operation Rough Rider is to protect global shipping and to stop them firing on US ships. But that might not be entirely true. The fact is, the Houthis haven't even attacked a US-flagged commercial ship since July 2024, when they unsuccessfully fired on the Maersk Sentosa. And they only started attacking US warships originally after the US and its allies launched Operation Prosperity Guardian and started attacking them with warships first. In January, the Houthis had paused attacking all commercial vessels, including those bound for Israel, their stated target in January. That happened after the announcement of a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza and the resumption of the flow of humanitarian aid into the ravaged enclave. The US and its allies dismissed the Houthis as terrorists and pirates, acting as proxies for Iran. But the Houthis have always maintained that the only reason they launched their attacks in the first place was in solidarity with their brothers in Palestine. They have consistently stated that their attacks both on Israel-linked ships and against Israel territory were a way to force Israel to stop its multiple war crimes and violations of international humanitarian law in the Gaza Strip. If Israel was going to deprive the Gazans of basic humanitarian aid, they would deprive Israel of its trade through the Red Sea. And to a great extent, the strategy worked. Operation Prosperity Guardian failed to stop the Houthis from attacking commercial shipping linked to Israel, forcing the port of Eilat to declare bankruptcy in July 2024, having lost 85% of its revenue. So, Operation Rough Rider appears to have very little to do with defending the interests of the US and everything to do with defending Israel's. That raises the question, is all this expense and destruction actually in the US's interest at all? On the face of it, it seems that Operation Rough Rider contributes very little to Trump's trademark concept of MAGA, Make America Great Again. Rather, it seems a case of PIF, putting Israel's interests first. For the many of the Americans who strongly support Israel's policies, both of the Jewish and Christian varieties, there's no difference. Massive contributions to Trump's election campaign from the likes of prominent pro-Israel lobbyists like Miriam Adelson surely also play a role. But there's actually a much simpler, cost-effective and less destructive way to stop the Houthi attacks on Israel, or at least to expose whether the Houthis really are acting out of what they say is a moral, religious and humanitarian mission on behalf of an oppressed brotherly, or they're the savage, bloodthirsty terrorists that Trump and the Israelis claim them to be. However, that involves drawing a red line in the sand for Netanyahu, something that Trump and his team seem entirely reluctant to do. On March 2nd, Israel announced that it was stopping the inflow of all humanitarian aid into Gaza, including all food, medicine, water, building materials, and even electricity. That was a clear breach of their ceasefire commitment and another gross violation of international humanitarian law. This complete blockade continues to this day, with devastating consequences for the vast majority of what remains of Gaza's population. This week, Philippe Lazzarini, the head of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, or UNRWA, which has been unceremoniously kicked out of Gaza by the Israelis, again strongly condemned the Israeli blockade. He emphasized that the blockade has exacerbated the humanitarian crisis and is contributing to imminent famine conditions, and called for the immediate resumption of humanitarian aid to meet the needs of all civilians in Gaza. He also criticized Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz's comments on aid, describing them as unacceptable and harmful to prospects for peace. The European foreign ministers of Germany, France and the United Kingdom have echoed Lazzarini's concerns, urging Israel to lift the blockade and allow the rapid and unimpeded flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. They warned that the current situation poses an acute risk of starvation, epidemic disease and death for Palestinian civilians. When the blockade began, the Houthis announced that they were giving the Israeli 4 days to lift it. or they would begin attacking Israel and Israeli-linked shipping again. To their credit, they had ceased attacks on commercial shipping and Israeli territory throughout the ceasefire until that point as promised. But Israel dismissed them, so on March 11, they announced that they were ready to resume their attacks. And that's why on March 15, Trump launched Operation Rough Rider. Maybe, instead of now sending even more ships, planes, bombs, missiles, and possibly boots on the ground to the region to defend Israel's illegal actions, he could just put his foot down and compel it to lift the blockade. After all, it was Trump's machinations that led to the ceasefire in Gaza in the first place, at least according to Trump. So, how could he do that? Easy, just stop sending Israel weapons until the blockade is lifted. Without the unfettered flow of US weapons, Israel would be compelled to play ball, and if Israel stops its blockade, the January ceasefire precedent suggests that the Houthis will likely stop their attacks forthwith. Judging from the hundreds of thousands of Yemenis that turn out regularly for pro-Palestinian and pro-Houthi attacks on Israel, the Yemeni population is overwhelmingly supportive of the Houthi leadership's actions against Israel and the US. But they'd undoubtedly also enjoy not having their civilian infrastructure being bombed to smithereens every day by US bombs. Confirmation of successful strikes on Houthi military facilities remains elusive. But the US has reportedly already destroyed an unfinished cancer hospital, a civilian water reservoir, multiple residential buildings, a neighborhood market, and even a graveyard. However, the chances of Trump taking such a step seem remote, to say the least. Responding to a question about putting more pressure on Israel, Trump's ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, responded that what was needed was more pressure on Hamas. Meanwhile, Trump recently authorized another shipment of weapons to Israel worth almost $4 billion. It's the latest in a steady stream that's been flowing from US stockpiles directly onto the heads of the hapless Gazans. According to data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, the US has long been the primary source of military hardware for Israel, providing 69% of its arms imports between 2019 and 2023. Over 100 undisclosed sales of military equipment to Israel have been approved since October 7, 2023, including advanced munitions. These include over 1,800 Mk-84 2,000-pound bombs and 500 Mk-82 500-pound bombs, which have been linked to high civilian casualties in Gaza. By December 25, 2023, over 10,000 tons of military hardware worth $2.4 billion had been delivered via 244 aircraft and 20 naval vessels. This arsenal included upwards of 15,000 bombs and 50,000 artillery rounds within the initial 6 weeks alone. Altogether, the US has shipped approximately 500 loads of arms to Israel, with deliveries occurring roughly every 16 hours. For sure, Israel's defense against potential attacks from Iran and its proxies like the Houthis might be weakened as a result of temporarily halting this immense flow of US weapons. But should Hezbollah, the Houthis, or Iran itself lift a finger to attack Israel, the US already has massive force in place to respond. And then the US would be in a position to smash them all, likely with the full support of most of the world, including possibly Russia, China, and many Islamic nations. But for now, there's no sign that Trump has any intention of getting in Israel's way in Gaza. His statements and that strange AI-generated video he released in February of him and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sunbathing in Gaza suggest strongly that supports Netanyahu and his far-right government in clearing the Palestinians out of Gaza entirely, by starving them if needs be. That means the Houthis will continue attacking Israel and shipping in the Red Sea, and Trump will have to keep sending more and more troops and equipment to the Gulf at an ever-increasing cost. For now, it remains to be seen what he has in mind. Perhaps he'll succeed in dislodging the Houthis, where over 25,000 US and Saudi bombings and a decade-long ground war against them since 2014 failed. But he might have to deploy some of those new advanced weapons he alluded to recently. So, what do you think? What new forces will Trump dispatch? What is the best way to stop the Houthis? Let us know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to The Military Show for more up-to-date news and information about conflicts around the world.